not kidding. Some weeks, it's just like, Josh, shut up. We're good. Let's go home. Dude, those songs. I don't know. Anyway, this week I've been thinking about seconds. Not time seconds, food seconds. You go to buffets ever, like Old Country Buffet, or what's the other one? Golden Corral, yeah. There's an interesting thing that happens at those places that we don't always think about. You'll get up with your plate or two or three, and you go up to the buffet and you fill it up with all of this kind of food that's in there. And, you know, they have everything from tacos to meatloaf. And you fill it all up, you take it back to your plate, you eat it all, and it's time to go back for seconds. What's interesting is most people will change their strategy a little bit. They'll change what they're getting because somewhere in that eating, they've determined the things that they like and the things that they don't like, and they only get more of the things that they liked. You realize that? It's the same thing when you're over at somebody's house. If you didn't like what they served you for dinner, I was one of those that was raised in the house that said, you are going to eat whatever is put in front of you. I don't care if it's still alive, you will eat it, because that's what's polite, right? What always happens is if you eat it and you didn't like it, and they go, would you like some more? You go, oh, I'm so full. You're just magically full. But then when they bring out the pumpkin pie, you've got room for that pie, right? What happened to being full? Because there's something about it, we don't get more of something we don't like. Same thing's true of your vacations. Think about the places you go back to over and over and over again. Odds are, your first time there, you had a great time. You loved it. You had fun. Room service was great. Food was great. Your excursions or whatever it was you did during the day, they were all great, and you want to go back there again. You booked your trip a year in advance. You went home and you told other people, you need to go on this trip too because it was amazing. But if you had gone and it was bad and there were cockroaches in the room and all that, you don't come home going, I can't wait to go back there. It just doesn't happen that way. Same thing with a doctor. Can you imagine if you went for a doctor's visit and they had the worst bedside manner and they gave you medicine that made you break out in a rash, and you sat down and were telling somebody this over coffee and then said, and I'm going back for another checkup next week. You would go, no, I'm going to find a different doctor because my first visit with them was not so good. I don't think I want to go back for more. It's true of television shows too, by the way. Right now, you're getting to that place in the television season where you're assessing the things on your DVR. Because there's a few shows that have 8 or 9 episodes backed up, and you're coming to the realization, I don't really like this show, so I'm not going to keep watching it. We make that determination pretty early on whether or not we're going to have more of that, whether it's a show, a trip to the doctor, a vacation, or a restaurant. Studies have shown that first impressions really matter. They are what set up return visits, is the first impression, the feeling that you walk away with after your initial time. And they say that a first impression, you only have about 7 seconds to make a good one. 7 seconds. That's not a long time. What that tells me is that in a very short time frame, people are making the decision whether or not they're coming back. Think about it. You probably had it happen the last time you were at a restaurant. You knew by the time you were seated at the table, especially if you weren't coming back. Over and over again. It doesn't take long for us to make that kind of determination. They actually say that 7 seconds or a first impression time span is the life of a match. Now, have you lit a match lately? It doesn't take long for a match to go out. I thought I'd light one for you. I didn't ask if this was okay, so hopefully nothing bad happens. But this match doesn't live very long, right? Eventually, it's going to go out in about, see, it did this in first service too. These are like the everlasting matches, and they break down. So you didn't see me shake my hand. It just went out. 7 seconds, not that long. is that time frame that you have to make a good first impression that will help someone determine whether or not they're going to get a second helping or come back for more. It's this reality that makes you and I clean our house like crazy when people are coming over. You realize that, right? I mean, none of us are real messy, nasty people. But when people are coming over for dinner, it's game on. We clean like never before. It was true when I was a kid. I've probably told you this before, but my brother and I made up this thing called GACU. It's an acronym, GACU, for Great American Cleanup. Because whenever anybody was coming over to our house, man, it was all hands on deck. We vacuumed like never before and dusted, and when we dusted this time, we actually moved the lamp instead of going around it. I mean, you get intense about cleaning up because you realize when someone's coming over for the first time, quickly they're making judgments about you. Quickly they're making assumptions about you and coming to some understanding of who you are in just a few minutes. It's why we clean. It's why we spend some time worrying about our foyers. Everybody in every house has a foyer. Some are big, some are small. Mine's tiny. It's the size of a carpet. But I have a foyer because here's reality. Everybody that comes to your house goes through the front door. Everybody. Even the times where you want to make people feel comfortable, so you leave your garage door open, they can come in that, they still go through the front door, right? Because it's wired into us. It's just kind of who we are. We go through the front door. So at the front door of all of our homes, we spend some time thinking through who are the people that are going to be coming in through that door. What sorts of people will be standing in this space today, tomorrow, and on into the future? Because we want to make a good first impression. I'll never forget when we moved into our home and my wife was decorating, she would keep walking over to the front door and standing at it and looking at our house. And I'm going, why are you standing there? She said, well, I want to see what everybody else is going to see when they walk in. I want to make sure it looks really nice because I want to make a good first impression. So we spend a lot of time in this space making sure that it works well for those people because we want them to come back, right? Well, most people. At the very least, when they're coming over, we want them to be feeling like they can move further into our home. And so we get specific about how we decorate this space, right? Think about your front door right now. What's hanging on it? Some of you have a very decorative fall wreath. You might have some pumpkins out front because you want it to be a warm, inviting, welcoming place. And there's probably a doormat right out in front of the door or right inside. And what does it say on it? Welcome. Some people put them up like, I'm busy, go away. They're a different kind of breed. We're not talking about them today. Welcome. You're welcome here. Come on in. And we put things like little tables with dishes so they could drop their keys in there. Or heaven, if they're doing a really good, they might put their phone in there so they can be all present with you. And there's places for you to put your shoes and hooks for you to hang your coats and places to hang your keys. And what it's doing is it's disarming you. They don't tell you that, but it's disarming you. It's welcoming you into their home and making you start to feel at ease. And it's built just for you. Building a good impression. I guarantee you the family does not spend a lot of time at the foyer of their house. You do, their guest. And here's what I'm learning about churches. Churches are built just like your home. Now, we don't have living rooms and kitchens and all of that kind of stuff. We do have a foyer, but what I'm talking about is more the software side of it. We have environments all over the place here at Emmanuel, and if you go to another church regularly, they're there too. There's spaces that are designed with certain people in mind to help them with very specific things. Now, in the church context for us, we are about helping people know Jesus and grow to be like him. And so our foyer, our front door, is all about that. And here at Emmanuel, our main foyer environment is Sunday morning. Now, there are all kinds of all kinds of foyer environments all over the place at Emmanuel. But one of the main ones is this space that you're in right now. And here's why. It's the front door. 99.5% of all people who are going to try a church for the first time come to Sunday morning for the first time. Now, others might try your small group. They might come to an event with you. They might do some of those other things. But the majority of people are going to log onto the website, figure out a little bit about who we are, and they're going to come on a Sunday morning. And so Sunday morning is our first impression to others, to guests, about who we are and who Jesus is. Now, some of you might be sitting there going, oh man, this sounds like we're going to get, like we don't want to be church anymore and we just want to make people comfortable. Not true. Because your foyer at your home is aimed at giving people an impression of who you are, not who you want to fake to be. Because it's your kids hanging on the wall in the picture, right? It's your favorite Bible verse that's hanging on the wall. It's your couch with the blanket that your grandma made you. It's who you are. You're just trying to help people engage with who you are with some ease. So it's not necessarily about try and not be a church anymore. It's just try and be a church that understands every Sunday is someone's first Sunday. Every week, someone's coming in through our front door for the very first time. And who are we telling them that we are? Who are we telling them that we're all about? How are we making them feel? That's key. Maya Angelou said, I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel. You see, our experience on that vacation, our experience in that doctor's office is what oftentimes will dictate whether or not we go back. How we feel after our first run through the buffet determines whether or not we'll go back. Now, the food doesn't change. The destination doesn't change. The doctor doesn't change. Even the TV show doesn't change. It's who it is. It's what it is. But your experience around it is what determines your willingness to have more of it. And so this morning, as we talk about a foyer environment, what I want you to understand is that every Sunday we are going to preach from the Bible. I don't know what else to preach from, so that's what we're going to preach from. And we're going to write series and sermons that are all about helping you grow to be more like Jesus. Full stop. But we are going to build an experience for our guests that's going to help them want more. That's going to help them feel like they can engage with what we're trying to share with them. And there's this story that Jesus told that I think really nails at least the mentality of how we're supposed to go about doing that. It's a parable that you've probably heard before called the Good Samaritan. But the Good Samaritan has sometimes been hijacked by the secular world. And we've turned it into this like just be a good person kind of thing. But the Good Samaritan is the heartbeat of Jesus. I think it's the heartbeat of his strategy that began this movement that 2,000 some odd years later has us sitting in a room singing songs to him. So I want to look at that story this morning. If you've got your Bible with you, it's in Luke chapter 10. So if you want to open up your Bible, pull out your phone. We're going to take a look at that this morning. And as we're reading, I want you to be thinking through, how would you feel? Think through with each person that we interact with this morning. How would I feel if I were them? Starting in verse 25 of Luke chapter 10. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus, he's so good, says, well, what's written in the law? He replied, how do you read it? The man answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. He nails it. Understand, This expert in religious law nails the answer to the question. He gets it. He quotes Deuteronomy chapter 6 to begin with. That's the part, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. It's a direct quote from Deuteronomy 6. And then he goes on to quote Leviticus 19 that says, love your neighbor as yourself. We call it the golden rule. It's actually part of the Torah, Hebrew law, to love your neighbor as yourself. Now what's interesting is those two passages come together in Matthew chapter 22 where Jesus is asked, what's the greatest commandment? And he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is equal to it, love your neighbor as yourself. And he says, in that is all of the law summed up. In that is everything that the prophets were trying to tell us and teach us. So this expert in religious law gets it. And I just want to pause real quick. Don't blow by this without understanding how difficult it is to love God with everything that you are. All of your heart, all of your soul, all of your mind, all of your strength, all of you. I wish I could say I give God 100% of me. Working on it. Not there yet. And then he says, love your neighbor as yourself. You don't think about this a lot. I don't think about this a lot, but I love me. I take good care of me. I make sure that I'm clean and that I'm clothed and that I've got a roof over my head and that I've got good food to eat and a nice car to drive and a climate-controlled bedroom so I don't sweat all night or freeze all night, right? We take good care of ourselves. We make sure that our needs are met and that we aren't wanting. And Jesus says that's who you're supposed to be. Verse 28, you have answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this and you will live. But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? He's a smart aleck, is what that means. But Jesus says, you've answered correctly. Now go and do this. He doesn't say, I'm glad you agree with this. Glad we had this talk. Let's carry on. He says, go and do this. You have to be this kind of person. It can't just be some theory or concept that you conceptually agree with. You have to be this kind of person. Do it. It has to become the filter through which you run everything in your life. Is this me loving God with everything that I am? And is this loving to my neighbor? That's our filter. Because that's who Jesus calls us to be. And he starts to roll this out in his parable, beginning in verse 30. In reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. You see, sometimes we underthink this guy. Because I grew up in Sunday school. And in Sunday school, the image I get is just a guy that is just kind of chilling in the ditch. That he'd gotten mugged and they just left him laying in the ditch. No, they stripped him naked and beat him to a bloody pulp to the point where he's half dead. This is a gruesome scene that Jesus is laying out here. And this happened on the road to Jericho, which lives up to its reputation of being a very dangerous and difficult road. It was dangerous because it was prone to robbers, and it was prone to robbers because the terrain was easily hideable in. I don't know if I said that right, but you get what I mean. The terrain was difficult, and so it was easy to hide behind, cracks in the rock and big rocks and jump out and get people, and it lives up to its reputation. And what I love is Jesus is using a real-life place in a story. Because people are going, I know that road to Jericho. Don't go there at night. Right? That's going through their mind. And he says this guy gets mugged and beaten. Verse 31. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. You got to understand, people would be listening to this going, excuse me, did you say Samaritan? I don't like Samaritans. That's what the Jews would say. They were bitter rivals, and we could spend all morning talking through why that was the case, but you've got to understand, Jesus really ruffled some feathers here by not only mentioning a Samaritan, but in the end making the Samaritan the hero of the story. And as they're listening and they hear, okay, a priest is coming down the road, they go, oh, good, the priest is going to help them. But the priest goes to the other side of the road. And then Jesus says, and a Levite came along, and I bet everybody went, oh, the Levite will help him. That's like in their blood. No, he crosses to the other side of the road. And then Jesus says, a Samaritan came along, and I bet the people went, well, he's going to spit on him as he walks by, because that's how they are. It says, no, the Samaritan stopped with the man. The Samaritan cared for him. There's this proximity factor that I don't think is accidental from Jesus, where he's making a big deal of the fact that the first two literally go to the other side of the road. That man is unclean. Protect myself. Don't put myself through the hassle. I need to get separation from him. But the Samaritan says he came to where he was, went to him, understanding that this was a dire situation and he was going to need to help. And so there's this pity factor. Now, sometimes pity has a negative connotation for us. And it's a thing that we don't want. We don't want someone's pity. But understand what Jesus is getting at. When he took pity on him, he had compassion for him. Something stirred in him for this poor soul that had been so broken. Stirred in him so much that he became very others-centered instead of self-centered. The people that cross to the other side of the road, it's about, I want to make sure that I'm okay in my little bubble. But this man says, I'm willing to get my hands dirty, I'm really willing to bend down, and I'm willing to enter into this mess with this person. We've talked about that. The Samaritan lives it out. But it doesn't stop with bending down and saying, hey, are you okay? Verse 34. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. I don't know about you, but I'm going, I don't know that I would do this. I don't know that I would do this for a complete stranger. It's not like the Samaritan walked up and went, oh, Bob, what happened? They didn't know each other. This is a complete stranger. Can you imagine him saying, okay, you're hurt, and I am going to go way outside of my comfort zone, and I'm going to help you. Understand the level of sacrifice that this guy makes for the other, the level of comfort that he gives up. The wine he was probably enjoying on his journey, he uses it to clean his wounds. The oil that was probably expensive, he uses to help him heal. The first aid kit that he was reserving for in case he gets hurt, he pulls out the bandages and bandages this guy up. The donkey that he was riding on that was going to keep him comfortable and rested and all of that, he gets off and puts this guy up on so that this guy can begin to heal. And then he takes him to an inn. He doesn't stop at like a rest area along the road and dump him there. He takes him to an inn, and he checks him in and says, listen, I want you to take good care of them. And he gives him 2 denarii. Now, that sounds like 2 coins, but that's actually 2 days' wages. This guy is going so far above and beyond what might be expected of normal people, it just makes me scratch my head. And it's all for the sake of helping him get better, helping him become whole again. And so, yes, I think there's some serious spiritual undertones here. But what's interesting is the Samaritan says, when I return. Now, can you imagine what that would have been like? Just put yourself in the hotel bed and you're the guy that's been picked up. You probably don't remember any of it. You wake up, you're all bandaged up, you feel a little bit better. Someone knocks on the door and comes in and says, I see you're awake. Can I get you anything? Are you hungry? How can I help you? He's just bewildered. What is going on? And the person that knocked on the door probably comes in and says, well, you got mugged and you were beat up pretty bad, but this guy brought you here. And by the time you got here, he had already sewn you up and just asked me to take good care of you. I don't even know who he was. Just imagine what this guy must have been feeling, understanding that the Samaritan had made him his personal guest. Now, he didn't invite him to his home, so that feels funny to say. But what he invited him into is his own life, because he's giving up things over and over again for the sake of this man. And he asked the innkeeper, treat him as if I were here, I think is what he's saying. Take care of him. Not because of who he is, but because of who I am. Not because of what he can give you, but because of what I'm giving you. Take care of him. And I imagine when the Samaritan comes in and says, how you feeling? This guy goes, who are you? Why did you do this for me? Can we go out to eat? Because I just have questions to ask you. I don't understand. No one else seemed to care. But you treated me differently. To me, and I'm going to apologize right now, this will not be the last time this ever happens, but I got to make a Star Wars reference. There's this big hairy creature in Star Wars named Chewbacca. He's the growling one. And he follows this guy around named Han Solo. And the reason he follows Han Solo around, I'm going to show you just how nerdy I am, is because at some point in their history, Han Solo saved Chewbacca's life. And so Chewbacca owes Han Solo a life debt. And so he follows Han Solo around. Whatever Han Solo needs, he does. However he can help, he does. I can imagine that in that hotel room, this guy is going, whatever you ask of me, I will do it. Wherever you go, I'm following. There's you, there's me. Let's go. Because what you did for me, how you treated me, how you regarded me, I need more of that. I need seconds of that. Verse 36. Which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. Jesus comes back to do it. You understand what I just told you. You get this principle. Now go and do likewise. Which would have been hard for them, right? Here's a Jew listening to Jesus and go be like a Samaritan. That would seem very hard to them. But you need to go and be this kind of person that's so about people being reconciled and healed, that you go out of your way, you sacrifice your own comfort, your own desires, your own plans for the sake of someone else. So this Samaritan does a couple things pretty specifically. First, he noticed. He noticed the person. We spend our lives going from Target to Burger King to church to home to work to all those other places. And most of the time, we don't even notice people. A lot of times because we're like this, texting or whatever, right? But we can go a whole day without realizing we had other people in the room with us. So this man notices. And I wonder what it would look like if we noticed each other more in this room on this day during this hour. Because there are people sitting a few chairs over from you that you've never met, that you've never talked to, and you have no idea who they are. But some of them are on the side of the road beaten up. And what would it look like if you were the Samaritan that came along and said, hey, how can I help? May not have a lot to give, but I got something to give. Right? That's the nature of a Foyer environment. So make no mistake, I'm not just talking about a Foyer environment here at Emmanuel. I'm talking about Foyer environments in your life. Those relationships where you're inviting people in and you're saying, let me help you get situated. Let me invite you into my life, and we'll be a part of this together. I notice you. And then he cared sacrificially. That's the second thing. There was a cost to him. Friends, we have to understand. To help people know Jesus and grow to be like him is going to cost us something. It's going to cost some of our comfort. It's going to cost some of our preferences. It's going to cost some of our time. It's even going to cost us some of our money. But if we're going to care for those people that right now are sitting on their porch or sitting in their living room or sitting at Starbucks down the street, if we're going to care for them, we're going to have to care sacrificially. And then third, he gave his best. And that's where I go, okay, this is Foyer talk, because we always put our best foot forward. It's the stuff that's going to give them the best first impression. It's why we stand at the front door and look at what are they going to see from this vantage point. It's about giving them our very best. And so on a Sunday morning, we work really hard to give you the best experience every single week. Not because we're trying to sell you something, but because we're trying to give you the opportunity to engage with Jesus. Engage with what we're trying to teach and do and live. And we worry about that all the way from the street to your seat. That's why every time you walk in, someone greets you. Probably 4 or 5 times by the time you get to your seat. It's why we've got a beautiful cafe and comfortable seating. It's why we work really hard to build a service that might make you think a little bit differently and helps you relate what we're talking about to your everyday life. Because we understand that this is our front door as a church. We don't change who we are. We're always going to be a church, and we're always going to talk about Jesus, and we're always going to challenge you to live and be more like him. But the experience we build around it, we won't change the food, we won't change the doctor, we won't change the trip, we won't change the TV show, but we're going to build a great experience around it so that you get it. So here's reality. No one goes for seconds when the firsts were bad. That's really what the Foyer is about. Little secret, this is not the end game. Right? When we start talking about churches growing, we often think, well, growth means we got a lot of people sitting in here. And that would be awesome, but that's not the end. Because the foyer is not the end. You don't have dinner in your foyer. You move them on to the next room, and we're going to talk about that as we go. But what we've got to make sure is that we put ourselves in a position to bring them to the next room, to help them understand the next step, and to ultimately take the next step. I think what the Samaritan did was he removed roadblocks so that this person could find real healing. And I think he, over and over again, as he was figuring out what he needed to do and what he needed to say, he was asking this question, what would I have wanted? If I were in his shoes, what would I want? So the question we have to wrestle with every Sunday is, when you walk in the building, what do you want? When you came here for the first time, what were you hoping would happen? Can I let you in on a little secret about first-time guests? Most of them, they're not saying, I hope I walk in and that preacher just makes me feel like a schmuck. Most people walk in saying, I hope someone shakes my hand. I hope someone sits by me. I hope someone asks me my name. And most people will say, I don't even know if I agree with what that preacher said this morning, but I want some more. I want to go back for some more because there's something there. I can't understand it yet. I can't nail it right on yet, but I want more of that. So this week in your small group, you're going to be talking about 2 other passages I want to read for you really quick that I think point more to this idea of going above and beyond, going out of our way to welcome people in. So Matthew 9, verse 9, starts like this. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, he told him, and Matthew got up and followed him. Now Matthew would have been a Jew working for the Romans, which was bad news. You don't do that. So why in the world would Jesus stop and invite that guy to come follow him? Matthew does. And while Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said, "It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." It's like Jesus stands at the door and says, "Welcome, come on in." And then in Luke chapter 15, it says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.' Then Jesus told them this parable. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, 'Rejoice with me, I found my lost sheep.' I tell you that in the same way there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent." And I read that and go, well, that doesn't seem fair. Because I've been a good Christian my whole life. And why aren't I getting a party thrown after me? And you know who I sound like? I sound like the brother in the prodigal son. "Dad, why are you so excited about this guy who screwed up? I've had it all together." See, I think Jesus is very about guests and outsiders and strangers and welcoming them in. Not changing who you are or what you're welcoming them to, but being very purposed and strategic and having a goal of we're going to go out and get them and we're going to invite them in and we're going to give them the kind of experience that says, "I don't want to leave." Because no one ever goes for seconds if the firsts were bad. So we've got to be conscious of that. Our mission is to help people know Jesus and grow to be like him. And one of the ways we help people know Jesus is that we invite them into our family and we give them a great time while they're here. And by great time, I don't mean they walk out hunky-dory happy or unchallenged. But the relational piece is good. No one goes for seconds when the firsts were bad. So let's make sure their firsts are great. And we might be well on our way to accomplishing our mission. Another thought, and then we'll be done. We ought to understand that the church is someone's first impression of Jesus. Have you ever thought about that? For most people, their first impression of Jesus is the church. Here's the scary part. You are the church. Not this building, not the website, not the social media stuff, you. So you are someone's first impression of Jesus. So how are you doing in the Foyer environments of your own life? Not just here. I wrestled with this week. What would it look like if I was being yelled at and scolded because I was having too many dinners with sinners? Because that was Jesus. And I think one of the reasons that people flocked to him and followed him, and that 2,000 some odd years later, 1,000 people will come to 2300 Dilly's Road to hear more about him, is because he was welcoming and inviting. There was a part of him that was attractive. People wanted more because their experience when they were with him was unlike anything they'd ever experienced before. No one goes for seconds if the firsts were bad. And so your challenge for this week is what I'm going to call the wow challenge. And I'm borrowing this from Ritz-Carlton. I've never been to Ritz-Carlton, by the way. Probably never will be to Ritz-Carlton, but I read about this practice that they have of wowing their guests. And they believe with their whole heart, if we wow our guests on their first day, they're going to come back and we'll have a loyal customer. You know how they do it? This is how they do it. When you're walking in the front door and you're greeted by someone holding the door, they ask you your name. Well, my name's Josh, and this is my son, Jake. And they say, well, you can make your way to the front desk. We're glad that you're here. And as we walk away, that person holding the door starts talking to their sleeve. Josh, wearing a red shirt, dark jeans. Son's name is Jake. The front desk is hearing that. You walk up to the front desk and they say, Josh and Jake, welcome to the Ritz-Carlton. And you're like, what? And they go way out of their way to make it the most incredible experience. They don't stop being a hotel. They don't stop doing all the things that hotels do. They just make sure your experience is unlike anyone else. And that's why they can charge the big bucks, right? Because they create loyal customers. So what would it look like if this week you took the mission personally and you made it all about wowing someone? Not with your theological mind, not with all that you give up for them, but just in the simple practice of noticing, caring, and giving. Where people go, wow, I don't know a whole lot about their God or their Jesus, but I want to start knowing. Because if he's anything like them, I want more. So this week, right now, when we're done, give guest services a week off. You welcome people. Find someone you haven't met. Ask them their name. Ask them about themselves. You don't have to do anything beyond that. Just get to know them a little bit. Especially if you can see they're looking around, go grab them. Hey, can I help you find something? They're going to go, I've never been to a place like that. I've never seen Christians actually live out what they preach all the time. And they might come back for seconds.